Hello and welcome back to A Heart Full of Dandelions. This is my KuroKen Haikyuu with a happy end, of course. This is part 2, so if you haven't watched it yet, you should watch the first part first. I hope you will enjoy it. Let's go! Upon arriving home, Kenma settled in front of his PC and searched up Hanahaki. It stung a little, going home alone. It was as if Kuro's absence was an itch he couldn't get rid of, but that thought only caused the scratching in his throat to flare up. He had to concentrate hard on the disease itself to avoid coughing. Every time he did, it brought tears to his eyes and made the website he opened before him unreadable. But even with the screen blurring before him, it became quickly evident that Haikyuu hadn't exaggerated. The disease was deadly. If he didn't do anything about it, he was going to die. The realization floored him, and for a moment he just sat in his chair, staring at the monitor in front of him and mindlessly plucking a few of the petals apart he had coughed up. This was a lot. Quite frankly, he didn't know what to feel aside from shock. Perhaps desperation? Any kind of sorrow upon being faced with the life he might lose. But he didn't. It was as if the information wasn't quite ringing through to him. This all seemed too abstract, too fantastical. But the yellow fluff, dandelion petals accompanied by the scratching in his throat were proof. This was real. He was really infected with Hanahaki, and if he didn't do something, he was really dying. And ultimately, this proved he was really in love with Kuro. This certainty didn't give him the reassurance he wished for. He thought as soon as he'd get that clear, he knew what he had to do, but the paths before him were obscured by the same eerie mist. Being in love with someone didn't necessarily mean wanting the life you can have with them. Or can't. Because ultimately he was only one part of the formula, and while it was possible to develop Hanahaki on the thought the love might be one-sided alone, it wasn't as common as the other variant. On top of that, both variants were indistinguishable from one another. The disease only gave him certainty about his own feelings, not the ones of his flower giver. Kuro. He sighed, reveling in the pain that followed the name, and accepted the coughing and defeat. His options had been limited the moment the first blossom bloomed within him and would only continue to shrink with every passing day. If he didn't decide fast, he'd bear witness to his own end, choked by flowers. Though deep down he knew his mother wouldn't let it come to that. He was still a minor, and arguably if he insisted on dying from a disease that was easily curable, not in a mental position to make such a decision, so ultimately he would be forced to get the surgery. Somehow that hurt him more, put him into a greater state of devastation than the prospect of literal death. How didn't he notice he had fallen so deep? He might not have known that, or when his feelings took a turn into the romantic, but he knew that he didn't want to lose Kuro. The relationship they had now, with everything building up from when they were kids, was the only one he knew. Taking the easy way out felt like severing that bond. If he could, he'd go back to before, or let his feelings gradually decline until only platonic love was left, but he couldn't. The surgery would see to cut the flowers right out of his chest, and with them, his feelings. He didn't know how much of their connection he would lose. Up until today, he didn't even know his feelings were romantic. How was he supposed to draw the line between what was romantic and what wasn't? What if this had been building for years without him noticing? How many memories would lose their colors? How much time would feel only empty when looking back? The simple thought of never being able to look at Kuro the same made him feel sick beyond his scratchy throat. He didn't want to give up on this. Never. His phone lit up with a notification, and the amount of emojis alone identified it as a message from Hinata. It coaxed a small smile out of him until his gaze glazed over again. He didn't want to give up on life either. He liked his life, now more than ever. Ever since the team had his back, people stopped bullying him for the most part. He had Kuro and Hinata. Volleyball was feeling okay, and he had gotten even better at video games. He saw no reason to think about the end, but now he was suddenly confronted with it. A few years prior, want wouldn't even have been a word that came to mind. Life had felt pretty much like volleyball did for him now. He had no reason to continue, but he also had no reason not to, so he just proceeded as usual. But now he had something. Friends he would hurt if he left. A team that he would let down. His mother. None of those things showed up suddenly, but right now they aligned perfectly, making him want to live. He wanted to be here with them. Underneath Hinata's message, complaining about Kageyama while accidentally praising him, a new one from Kuro appeared, wishing him well and asking whether he needed anything. Immediately, a new burst of flowers expanded rapidly in his chest, and he hunched over while coughing. It took 2 almost fully formed flowers for his throat to calm. His throat ached painfully. The surgery wasn't an option, and dying wasn't either. No, he had to fix this before it would come to either of those events. Calmly, much calmer than he should have been, he closed the tabs on his computer and instead started looking up things like how to get over a crush, but it was futile. The advice, while nice, mostly, in parts, wasn't helpful or even applicable to his situation. Somehow, when most people used the word crush, they didn't think of childhood best friends, turned one-sided feelings, turned lethal unrequited love. And when he searched that up, it was way too specific. The best he got were some mediocre movie and book suggestions that weren't really up Kenma's alley. Not that he usually watched a lot of films. Kuro convinced him occasionally to try something new, but... Big mistake. He coughed again, his throat aching in protest. Kenma? A soft knock echoed from the door, accompanied by his mother's voice ringing through from the outside. She opened it carefully. You are home early? She tried sounding cheerful as she moved to his side and soothingly rubbed over his back to help with the coughing. Kenma tried to respond, so are you, but his voice was still taken. Oh no, did you catch a cold at practice? Or just overexert yourself again? She knelt down beside him and placed a hand on his forehead. No fever, that's a good sign. I'll make you tea right away and you should get some rest. She lovingly caressed his arms and smiled softly. His mother waited for him to reciprocate her touch, communicating that it was okay before she kissed him on his forehead and pulled him in her arms for a brief embrace. I'll get the tea and tell your school that you won't be coming in tomorrow. You get in bed and rest. Oh, and change into something more comfy. Your uniform will get all crinkled like that. She was halfway out the door as she remembered the last part, and Kenma simply nodded. He followed her instructions and begrudgingly accepted the clothing as he pulled one of Kuro's hoodies over his head. It was the most comfortable he owned, and comfortable was just what he needed right now. When his mother did return, she placed the tea on his nightstand and covered him in an additional blanket she brought, but didn't immediately leave afterward. So, you want to tell me where you looked up how to get over a crush? You don't have to answer, and I didn't mean to spy on you. I just noticed when I came in. Kenma glanced over at his PC he had shut down by now and sighed. His mother always knew everything about him and how to read his face perfectly. He doubted she needed to see the tab that was still open when she came in to puzzle together at least part of what was going on. I think I might have a crush on Kuro, but I'm not sure he sees me that way. That's a tough one. You do like him a lot. Yes. I don't want to ruin what we have. Even if we get together. At our age, it will last. I can't lose him. She smiled sympathetically. Why do you immediately think of the worst that could happen? He could like you back. The two of you could be the exception. They could, but why should they? What was so special about them? If at all, Kenma was especially difficult to love. He was horrible at returning affection. His love languages didn't align with any of the 5 people were taught. He didn't answer and just buried his face further in his pillow. It was no use thinking about what-ifs concerning a distant future. To even consider that, he'd have to have the guts to confess and not get rejected immediately after. Suddenly, he felt a gentle touch along his back as his mother started to rub soothing circles over the blanket to console him and gain his attention. I know this isn't easy for you, and that's okay, Kenma. KuroKen is a very caring person. Even if he doesn't feel the same, he won't just leave you behind. I only know him briefly, not nearly as well as you do, but I'm certain of that. And if it turns out I was so wrong, then he didn't deserve you anyway. She huffed and crossed her arms in faint determination, half joking. It coaxed Kenma out of his hiding spot, namely the pillow, and he turned toward her again. I don't want that. I know, and it's not gonna happen. Have I ever been that wrong about someone? He thought about it and chuckled as she took his paws with faint offense, everything to make her son smile a little and lighten the situation. No. See, trust a mother's instinct, but take the time you need. You should recover first, and in the meanwhile, think it over. He gave her a weak smile that was quickly overshadowed by another coughing fit. All this talk about Kuro wasn't good at all for the flowers rapidly claiming his lungs. All throughout, his mother gently patted his back to ease the coughing. She didn't notice the small spots of yellow Kenma hid in his hand. Rest now. I love you, Kenma. Love you too. She pressed a kiss to his temple and squeezed his hand in reassurance before she turned to leave. Oh, and Drink the tea when it's still warm. It'll help. He groaned, but not a week later was stuffing the traitorous yellow petals covered in a suspicious red tint under his pillow. Ultimately, confessing was his only option. He doubted he'd get over him when Kuro rejected him. He doubted he'd be able to move on afterward, so there was a good chance he couldn't avoid the surgery after all, but he had to try. If he was forced down a path he didn't want, he at least needed to exhaust all other options beforehand to feel no regrets when he did. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like because it would really help me out. And tell me in the comments what you thought about this part. Also, obviously, subscribe for the next part. The final part will premiere next week on Friday. I'm super excited for it. But anyway, yeah, I have this headcanon that Kenma has like an amazing mom who like treats him really great and notices autism and helps him a lot with it. Tell me your headcanon about Kenma and his family situation. And as always, special thanks goes out to my nerdy neckos who help this channel so much. If you also want to support me, check out the join button under this video. Here are my other social media, though not listed. Where I am most active and easiest to reach is the Discord. Link is in the channel description. And here I have some more awesome videos for you, including the next part should be out already. I hope you will like it. Enjoy. Have a great day.
Grow hard about what you want to be. Step 4. Everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up.